Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Jimmy Wind, CEO of VirtualMetric, and what we are covering here today is something that keeps incident responders up at night and should probably also keep a little bit more CISOs up at night too. The title says it all. 75% of identity attacks exploit logging gaps. And that's not a theory, that's a number derived from real life cases, from real breach investigations. And today, you are going to hear exactly what that looks like from people who do those investigations on a day-to-day basis. We are actually broadcasting live from the RSA conference at San Francisco. We are all badged up and we are broadcasting live right around the corner from the famous Union Square. RSA is exactly the right time and moment to have this discussion. RSA is where 40,000 people from the cybersecurity industry gather to talk about the future of cybersecurity. But what Invictus sees every day in their IR engagements is that many organizations are still struggling with something far more fundamental than agentic AI. They simply don't have the logs they need when a breach happens. And that gap between what the industry is selling, the shiny future, and what organizations actually have in place when it matters is what today is about. So let me introduce the speakers. On my right side, which you don't see, but you have to believe me, is Curtis Hanson. He's the managing partner of Invictus Incident Response. He and his team get flown in when big organizations across the globe get breached. And he will tell you all about what he faces in reality. And on my left side, there is Yusuf Öztürk. He's the co-founder and CTO of VirtualMetric. And he has created, with his team, DataStream, a security data pipeline solution, which helps organizations collect all their logs, normalize, filter, and send it to the SIEM so that any visibility gap can be closed. So the agenda, we will start with Curtis. He will tell you the hard truth from real breaches. Then he will walk you through the anatomy of some real investigation cases. And he will cap off with explaining how an ideal logging blueprint looks like. And then we will hand over to Yusuf. He will explain how you can close the visibility gap and be better prepared by using our product DataStream. And he will also show you how that product works with a demo. And then before closing, we will explain how a combination of Invictus and DataStream will make a great business case in being better prepared. And then we will end up with some Q&A. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we will address them at the end. So let me start with giving the microphone to Curtis. Take it away, Curtis.
Thank you, Jimmy. So yeah, as Jimmy highlighted, we'll talk about the hard truths from real breaches. And I think, coming here to San Francisco and RSA, I've been reading a lot of sort of industries, say annual reports, looking at some of the trends. Invictus, we do that ourselves too. It's not a shiny report we put out, but we still want to understand what we saw this past year and what that might mean for the future. And let's dive into it. So if we jump ahead here, I think.
Challenge with the.
Here we go. So this webinar, I think, highlights, based on the title, that 3 out of 4 cases we handle are more or less defeating traditional identity controls we have in place, such as MFA. And maybe it's a shock to some, maybe it's not to others, but I think the new perimeter that we are tasked with defending is that sort of identity. And we see adversary in the middle, phishing attacks, consent phishing attacks, all sort of defeating traditional MFA that we thought was so safe and secure. And so, one, this is kind of a wake-up call for those silent controls we thought were keeping us safe, to then maybe increase them a bit, right? So phishing resistant MFA for high privilege accounts, such as FIDO USB keys or Windows Flow for Business, etc., can actually stop those attacks dead in their tracks. So cookie sessions and security tokens aren't stolen and then leveraged in different ways. And what we see in those cases oftentimes is there's just not visibility over this, right? We've set MFA, we think we're good, and we forgot to actually create some alerts and monitoring around risky sign-ins or around impossible traveler movements. And that ultimately leads for us being called in because that got missed, right? And we're seeing more and more of this happen. And I think this aligns a lot with what industry, if you read some of the reports out there from the Mandiant and CrowdStrikes of this world, also talking about sort of that identity crisis as we see. But once threat actors kind of defeat that and get in, they like to set up persistent mechanisms. They like to have some backdoors, and I already alluded to this with sort of consent phishing, but we are very much cloud-focused incident response, and a lot of cloud cases deal with Microsoft 365, leading to business email compromise, right? A CEO or a CFO has had their account taken over and a fraudulent payment transfer made with that email address. And we'll see in that phishing that the threat actors actually deploy an OAuth app, and it's given consent, it's a valid token. That lays there dormant in that tenant and allows for persistent access over time. So even when you revoke the credentials from that user, they still have a way to get back in, access data, and yeah, basically do a lot of damage when you think you've solved the problem. And I tacked on there too, we also see in classic BEC cases, hidden forwarding rules also there, sending emails to and from the threat actor, so data is still flowing out, and you might think, hey, we've reset the password, we've reset MFA, we're good. And that's just not the case. And this all sort of lines with, we should have some logging in place to detect these things, right? And the gist is, well, we often get this saying we don't know. 1 in 3 organizations we go into lacks either critical logs themselves or lacks the proper retention period. And we often joke, no logs, no crime, right? They don't exist, therefore nothing happened. As much as that is, fun to say, the reality is it's a shame when you don't have the logs in place to forensically say what has happened. And then your insurance, your legal team, your regulators say you now have to assume a total breach. And that cost goes from something much more manageable to something extreme. We also see that organizations maybe have logging in place, but it's just the defaults. So in a Microsoft world, a lot of those defaults are just 30 days, but those phishing attacks happen 60 days ago. And if you don't have that visibility backwards 90 days, and we'll talk a little bit later around what we think is best practice, you just can't determine forensically sound what occurred. And that just causes a lot of costs, a lot of damage. In a time of crisis, you don't want that, right? But when we're looking through these statistics and what we're seeing in cases is, if you do it right, if you do have the logs in place, you do have the retention, and again, we'll talk a little bit later about the architecture. So everything is collated in one place. The logs aren't segmented or fractured. You can query all that data really efficiently. We are 4 times quicker at doing that response. That's 4 times cost savings, 4 times you can get to doing business. That's huge, right? And so a little bit of spend, a little bit of effort on the front end to have that telemetry, have that visibility will actually save you a ton of money, and you don't need to have that wake-up call in a moment of crisis to reap those benefits.
Those are impressive statistics, Curtis. I mean, 4 times faster is 4 times faster, which is a very big impact. So, can you walk us through a couple of cases and walk us through where you stumble across these logging apps and how they impact the casing?
Yeah, so I think it's always nice to kind of take those statistics we've talked about and put them into an actual investigative mindset and get to that sort of that truth of, we're seeing these attacks. It also should translate to the proper visibility and logging we need in place, right? So for us, one of the most common attacks we see is crypto mining, or it's also commonly known as crypto jacking. And that's basically when, you have a cloud environment, maybe a VM was exposed, it got taken over, and someone spins up all these VMs and basically mines like Monero cryptocurrency. At the end of the month, you get your Azure AWS bill, and you're like, how the heck did we spend $200,000, $300,000 worth of compute? This is usually the case, right? And so when we begin that investigation, we're always working backwards. So we know what happened. We now need to do the root cause analysis and figure along the way what might have happened or not happened. And it starts for us in this case. We have a service principal. We know spun up that machine. There are certain logs we now know to go and collect and look for. So in this case, let's assume we're a Microsoft shop. We were going to go look at those Azure activity logs and see actually what's that service principal ID, see what happened, when it happened. And from there, we kind of want to pivot to the actual user that got compromised, right? Because they got into our network somehow. We want to know what user that was. Was there an alert around it? Do we have visibility over it? And usually that is a different set of logs. So we have Azure activity logs. If we're good, we also have sign-in logs, and we can see that user who was compromised. And maybe we can see actually it was a high-risk user sign-in event that we just missed, right? But a lot of times we actually don't have those logs, so they don't go far enough back. But in this case, let's assume we have it. Once we've identified that user, we also want to make sure that the threat actor didn't do anything else in that environment, right? We know they spun up some VMs, they use our compute to sort of mine that, run up our bill. But did they leave any backdoors? Did they touch any data? Did they exfiltrate any data? These are all classic questions your legal team, your regulator, insurance is going to ask. And so we need to use a variety of log sources to actually kind of check the list off of, yeah, crown jewels were not touched, this data was not exfiltrated, et cetera. And that's everything from audit logs to Azure activity logs again. The unified audit log is a very powerful one that we often use. And luckily by default, that's 180 days. So we can get a lot of value there. But we really want to be confident, right? In a lot of our investigations, it is being forensically sound in what we do to give a definitive answer. And one of those log sources we use to do that is network traffic, right? If you're concerned about data maybe flowing out, so they spun up some cryptocurrencies, you want to identify those VMs. Maybe you're concerned that data actually got out too, and maybe they're selling it on the dark web on the side as well. You need flow logs, and you need to be able to see what traffic came in and out. Now, the kicker here is it's nice if we have those, but the reality is most organizations don't. They see net flow logs as too costly, too cumbersome. It's better if we just don't turn those on. And the majority of cases, we see that. It's the truth. And there's a lot of cases too, if you are ever targeted by state-sponsored activity, NetFlow logs are very, very valuable to kind of go that investigative layer deeper to really determine what transactions occurred over the wire and make something of it. So that's crypto mining. I think we got one more case for you. We could talk cases all day long, and I didn't preface, but it's worth actually calling out here before we dive in here is every incident is a bit different. So we have cases where, ransomware is generally follows a playbook, but every environment's different, every process is different. And so there's always something a bit unique about cases. And we'll see on the next slides how we can kind of get ourselves 70% there, and then everything else is a little bit dynamic and custom. And if we assume we have an AWS environment, we see that there's a ransom note left in an S3 bucket, we want to understand what data might have got deleted and taken from that bucket. And again, kind of starting where we left off, flow logs very expensive. Lots of S3 storage buckets can run that logging cost up again. So we'll oftentimes see very spotty coverage across blob storage accounts for Microsoft or S3 buckets for AWS and so forth, just because, it costs a lot to store that data. But in this case, we need access to it to actually tell you what was there, what got deleted, what might have got exfiltrated. And we'll also use CloudTrail events. And that's kind of a nice thing about AWS is everything's a bit more centralized in CloudTrail. So it does help with the investigation. But that notion of we need those S3 access logs to really tell you definitively, and organizations sometimes just cheap out and don't configure it. So that's where we start that investigation. And then again, we're working backwards, right? What access did they have? What else did they touch? Again, we'll go through sort of management events in CloudTrail to see what they did. What was the steps they took from A to get to B to C, lateral movement throughout the network. etc. And I will say a lot of times CloudTrail logs by default are 90 days retained. So there is some good visibility out of the box. But again, as we'll see in the next slide, there's always a little bit more we can do. But an investigation like this will kind of cap it off with understanding what actual malicious actions could have been performed in that AWS environment. Again, finding sort of backdoors or any other persistent mechanisms that might lay dormant. And again, we'll go back to CloudTrail management events to determine that. So hopefully this gives a bit of a tangible feel to what investigation looks like and what are some of those critical log sources we're relying on, and also the reality of when they don't exist, we definitively can't tell you what happened, and that can drive up costs, obviously.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Curtis. That really shows and highlights the issues that you stumble across when you investigate various types of breaches. I know that incident responders they do need to be a fan of puzzling, but the thing is, you also recommend customers to reduce the amount of puzzling that you need to do by having a proper logging blueprint in place. So tell us about what you would recommend. How would a less puzzling environment look like?
Yeah, fantastic. So as I kind of prefaced before, we can get you 70% there, right? This blueprint will kind of fit most organizations, and then you'll need to tweak it based on technology, based on team, and et cetera. But there's kind of three main pillars we're going to focus on. So first up is log types. What are those logs we should have in place? We use a very simple ontology of must have, should have, and nice to have. So we try and simplify it, not oversimplify it, but if we look at, say, must-have logs, for example, they're essential for doing detection and response work. So not just incident response, but also active threat hunting and detection as well. I think that's a very important call out here. So if we look at those cases we just went through, we need cloud logs, right? We also will need network logging. We'll also need identity logging. All these things are non-negotiables, and we need those in place. Now, that'll get us to answer a lot of those questions we saw previously. We can take it a step further, and there are should have logging as well. And these are to go a little bit more granular to ask some of those questions that maybe the pesky lawyers are saying, hey, we want to know definitively, was this touched or not, right? And we'll need a little bit deeper visibility. So a tangible example would be in a Microsoft world, we want those Microsoft Graph activity logs. Like those aren't a default logging, but those are very powerful when they're turned on, right? And that gives a little more of a, well, we should have those in most cases because it'll help us solve a lot more incidents and answer those questions. And of course, nice to haves, they are nice to have. So a lot of those flow logs and things I mentioned, we would like to see those. And I think Yusuf's going to do an amazing job here coming up on how we can make those nice to haves a reality in these situations, which is going to make us all very, very happy, from IR to a CISO to the board. So log types, very simple, must have, should have, nice to have. Then we need to ask ourselves, how long do we keep these logs, right? And it various sort of retention periods regarding, what you're using, technology, et cetera. Some stuff's default 30 days, some stuff's 90 days. As forensic practitioners, 180 days, that minimum retention period we expect. We can talk later and stuff about like what should be hot logs versus in a data lake versus maybe cold storage. But for us, we want to have at least minimum 180 days. Best in class or best practice is 1 year. It's 365. If you look at like FedRAMP and stuff, I think it's 365 plus 1. So they want that extra day in there for whatever regulatory reason. But then you'll also have regulators say, like for HIPAA example, you need to store these logs for 7 years in cold storage. So there are some things we want as practitioners, and there's some things also we need to remember from regulators as well. But I think moving away from default 90 days to 180 is already a great step for retaining those logs. And last but not least is architecture. So we can have all the logs we want. We can have them retained. If they're fragmented, you're going to slow everyone down. You're going to miss detections. You're going to bumble response. And as we saw earlier, when everything's centralized and retained and everything's great, we're 4 times quicker. And that means organizations in the SOC are going to be 4 times quicker. So that single pane of glass is really key. Also, you want this data to be immutable, right? That sort of CIA triad. We don't want threat actors, busting up the integrity of our data. So making sure it's immutable is very important. And last but not least, when we look at architecture, is we want it to be searchable, right? We want to be able to run those queries quickly so we can get back on our feet quicker. So making sure they're in a SIEM, they're in a language we all understand. We can actually, again, not have fragmented data. All this goes into a nice little blueprint to give us a starting point to do a bit better, right? Learn from those mistakes we're seeing in the wild to being a bit more resilient as an organization today.
Thanks, Curtis. That looks like a great blueprint, and we know obviously that every organization is different, every industry is different, so it needs some customization, and Invictus can help make it more customized in your situation. And the good news is that we will now turn the microphone to Yusuf, and he will show you how to close the visibility gap and how to turn these gaps into a blueprint that suits your taste. Yusuf, the microphone's yours.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks, Curtis. It was great insights. So yeah, to actually make that blueprint easy and even actually possible, the solution is actually VirtualMetric DataStream. So VirtualMetric DataStream sits between your data source and your destinations, like these object storages or SIEM environments or any basically targets. And being in the middle, we can transform the logs, we can do the collection, and then we can deliver the logs to the different destinations. And in the next slide, I can show you how we do this. So we start this with collecting the data from the source. We can get the data from different environments, like from servers, like application and server logs, also the network device logs, and then endpoint telemetry, and even the cloud and SaaS APIs. And additionally, to make this easier, we have a smart agent to agentlessly collect those logs. And after that, we basically push the logs into the normal telemetry pipeline process, where we normalize and enrich the data. And later on, we can filter and reduce the noise and the data volume. And additionally, we can enrich the data with the threat intel and context. And the key element here is that we can automatically normalize these log sources to the leading schemas like ASIM or SIEM, ECS, OCSF, UDS, UDM, etc. And after that, we can start doing the multi-stage routing by use cases. First of all, we can send the data to compliance storages like Azure Blob or Amazon S3 or Google Cloud Storage, etc. And for the investigation reasons, we can send the full fidelity into the data lakes, such as Sentinel Data Lake or Amazon Secure Lake or Databricks, etc. And for the detection purposes, we can push the subset, like relevant logs into the SIEM environments, such as Microsoft Sentinel or Google SecOps, CrowdStrike, etc. And in order to do this cost reduction on the SIEM, we have different elements. We have 3 modular reduction layers. And in these layers, we can easily give you between 50 to 90% cost reduction on the SIEM environment. And in order to do that, we have first field normalization, which basically gives you 50 to 60% ingest reduction by eliminating the unused fields based on the target schema. And in this normalization, we are not dropping any events. And another option is the event filtering. And we can remove the events based on the event IDs or maybe some conditions or rules. And then you can also do those rules by your requirements. And additionally, we have an intelligent sampling. You can reduce the event numbers by sampling them based on the test network environments or maybe different categories. And combining with these two, you can get up to 40% additional reduction. And this basically gives you the enough reduction value on the SIEM, so only the relevant data goes into SIEM. To make this process easy and flexible for you, we have 2 different options. One of them is the content packs. Content packs gives you an easy deployment option, such as Microsoft Central Automation or like some vendor packs like Fortinet, which helps you to collect and normalize the data out of box in the solution. And especially these automation packs gives you these three options to store the data into different environments. And additionally, if you want to enhance your pipelines, we are giving you 170 plus processors for making more flexible pipeline creations and modifications, including different things like threat intel or AI or security processors. You can easily extend these pipelines based on your needs. So there is no code requirements. You can easily do with these processor blocks. So after explaining these options, now maybe we can go into the demo environment and we can see how we are doing this. So for that reason, I will share my screen. Okay, so this is the VirtualMetric DataStream's homepage. So where you see all the elements, and the main element in this screen is actually the fleet management. So in VirtualMetric Cloud, we basically do only fleet management. No, your secure data goes into our cloud. Everything happens in your environment, and we only give you like a config management here. So in the fleet management, you will see some options like directors. So director is the main component where you install in your environment. And with the director, you can process the data very easily. These directors can be managed or self-managed. So like for the air gap environments, you can also use self-managed. And we support different things like access management, or you can even do auto updates with the directors. So it gives you lots of options to make that environment more automated and secure. And after creating directors, what you need to do is, of course, defining your data sources. For that reason, we have devices here. In the devices, you have different options like the Azure Event Hubs to collect any data basically from the Azure cloud, or things like Amazon S3 or Security Lake. So you can also get the Amazon logs, or things like syslog, TCP, UDP, or Windows machines to be able to get the logs internally in your environment. And for the Windows logs, we can get the logs with, again, two different options, agent and agentless way. In the agentless way, you can even use the Active Directory credentials, like the service accounts, so you can connect to the environments and then start collecting the data. And I will show you how we do in the dataset and profile section. We have different categories based on the data source. For instance, for the Windows machines, we can get Windows security events or event logs. Even today, we support the DCR rules, so you can move your existing DCRs to collect the logs. And each one of them is giving you more details, like what to collect, how you want to collect, and how you want to filter and minimize the number of event logs. And after these datasets, you can just assign these datasets to the machine, and then we can automatically collect those datasets or profiles from the devices. And after collecting the logs, the next option is your targets. In the target section, you can define your object storage endpoints or data lakes or SIEM environments. That's also very simple to add. We even support managed identity for Azure environments. So you can just go in and type your credentials, or you can use the managed identity. We even support managed identity auto discovery for the streams, so you don't have to do anything. And it's very simple to add your configurations from here. So after defining all your targets, now we need to do this three-stage routing option. So for that reason, as I mentioned in the slides, we have content hub packs. So we support many different vendors out of box. They're all coming with the automatic reduction options. Some of them are disabled, so you can even extend them, modify them based on your needs. Many of our customers have like profiles, so they can apply for each different customer types. And the best thing is here is the automation packs, where you can choose your automation pack based on the stack that you use. Maybe you're a Google person, so you can also do Google SecOps automation. But if you go to Sentinel, for instance, we have different options like sending logs to Sentinel or Sentinel Data Lake, and which tables you want to send, how you want to send it, if you want to use ADX, or if you want to send it to the blob storage. And additionally, the optimization configuration, a very simple way, just turning it off, and then you're ready with the options. So after deploying these content packs, you just need to go to route options, where you can define your source and destination and do a route like this, and then choosing the pipeline that you want to use. But you typically go into the advanced routes, because we know that you will get many data sources based on those blueprints. And then here that we can modify, like optimize the configuration, the logs, and then based on your configuration, we can send it to the different locations. So after defining these advanced routes, you will see that you will have the data in the different formats, like raw format or optimized format, into different environments. And this is basically how we do in DataStream very easily.
All right, thank you very much, Yusuf, for explaining how the DataStream product can help and also show us how it works. Obviously, people that like software prefer seeing the software compared to having slides, but the slides help explain how it works before you do the demo. So thanks, Yusuf. So what does this mean? Curtis already used the word ROI. So let me quickly show you how reducing these visibility gaps from a logging perspective reduces cost at every stage, starting at the prevention. So if you have your logging in place, you can easily detect malicious behavior, and you can stop breaches from occurring, which is a good case, saves a lot of money. But even if there's an incident, logging will help you contain the incident to limit the size, which will save a lot of money. This 1 million figure is derived from IBM's latest breach report. And last but not least, you will be much faster in responding and resolving. And that's again the 4 times faster figure that Curtis used earlier. So full visibility is not just about improving security, but it's about saving money at the same time. And DataStream, as Yusuf mentioned, can save on ingest cost, making it affordable to close the visibility gap. You would even, if you don't collect all the sources today, by adding more sources and use DataStream, you would even still save on your SIEM invoice. So broader coverage, lower cost of ownership, sounds like a good deal. So that's the end of the slides, the end of the presentation. So let's see if we have any questions. So one question we have is, how important is it to have access to logs for insurance purposes? How strict are insurance companies in that sense? Curtis, can I refer that question to you?
Yeah, it's actually a really great question. So been actually chatting a lot with insurance firms as of late, and it's becoming increasingly more important to have those logs for insurance purposes. Regulatory effects are also kind of dictating that. So insurance firms are kind of tired of incident responders taking a long time. So kind of to that point before, right? If we can be 4 times quicker, insurance firms are much more happier. So across the board, we're seeing insurance firms mandate a little bit more around security logging, so asking a bit questions around that. And if I have my crystal ball, I will say probably in the near future, there'll be some mandates around that for certain insurance firms, certain size organizations, to definitively say I have logs in place, like those must-have logs are there. And if you don't, your premium is going to go way up, or maybe you just get denied on a claim outright. So yeah, it's a very great question. It's one of those that insurance is catching up to kind of what we've been describing. And we're seeing a trend towards not only adoption of having logs, but probably a requirement for insurance heading to the future.
Thanks. So maybe we'll see a future where we have an equivalent of if you were obviously from the Netherlands, so we have a lot of bikes. So you can't get your bike insurance to pay out if you don't have a proper log on your bike. So maybe we see an equivalent situation in having logging in place in order to get paid for your cybersecurity insurance would be a good case. Another question I see here is more technical. How can I make sure that different Windows machines collect the relevant logs? Maybe I only want to collect IIS logs from one set of machines, but on others, I'd like to collect different logs. How do I do that? I would like to give that question to Yusuf, obviously.
So thanks for this question. So it's a good question. In order to do that, you can create multiple device profiles. So in this device profiles, you can create your profile based on the maybe type, let's say maybe domain controllers or maybe IIS machines. And then based on that, you can create security event log profiles, maybe data collection profiles, and then you can assign these profiles to those machine types. And in a very quick, near future, we will also add this enrollment agent option. So you can also enroll the machines based on different criteria, like their domain name or maybe IP address blocks, etc., to the relevant profile. So you can also make this process highly automated. I hope this answers the question.
I don't see any more questions. So I think it's time to wrap up this presentation. If you are interested in getting support in optimizing your logging blueprint, and also if you need experts to help you respond to incidents, Invictus is there to help. And if you think that it would be a great idea to close your logging gaps, then VirtualMetric's DataStream would be a great option, if I say so myself. And if you go to our website, you're free to try it out. And we'd also gladly help you with a demo or a proof of concept. So thanks everyone for attending the webinar. If you are at RSA, I hope you have a great event. And if you're calling in from Europe, have a great evening and hope we can reconnect later. Goodbye.
Goodbye.